So I'm joined today by Peter Lemon, previously the CIO at the Defence Infrastructure Organisation and now a strategic consultant at Max-EU focusing on IWMS and EAM. Today we're talking about what he's been up to recently, design thinking, technology, sustainability, and what happens next. So Peter, whilst companies have been recovering from the many impacts of the pandemic and resultant shift to hybrid working, you've been delivering not only the new Max HQ in Birmingham, but also another prestigious large-scale office project.
Yeah, Neil. So yeah, it's been a busy time over the last couple of years, and I think we're all trying to recover from the pandemic at the moment, both from a property point of view and for our own people and our employees. So it's been an interesting time. As you say, the last couple of years have mainly been tied up with two projects. One came about before the pandemic, which was driven by a site which was quite an old site, had 700 employees on it, but we ran out some sensors around the site and measured utilisation across the site, we ran out something like 500 sensors over a weekend. Within 3 weeks, we had a really great data set that showed utilisation across the whole site. Within 3 months, we developed a business case to dispose of one of the buildings. Within 18 months, we'd written a business case to actually get rid of the whole site and build a new building somewhere else. So I was involved in that whole process from start to finish, and then I took on responsibility for the design and the build of leading the design and the build of the new building as well, which was really good. Again, we based that on utilisation, making the best use of space, but also heavily on sustainability. The final building ended up, so the original build site was 7,200 square metres. The new site was 2,600 square metres, but had nearly double the population in a third of the space. And it was also a near net carbon zero building as well. So we really did change the thinking about how we did the building. We had a really great team working on that as well. And I was lucky recently to go back and pay them a visit. And it had a real buzz around the place. And it's actually won the Government Smarter Building Award since. So that was a really interesting project. I suppose the Max one was slightly differently. That was a post-pandemic requirement. And it was really around, Max has seen massive growth over the last 8 years, 15% year on year. So the size of the team today is quite large, and the offices they were in were not big enough anymore. We probably could accommodate 20% of the team at any one time. So that really came about saying we needed a new office space. And actually, we took a different approach in that. We actually went out to all the team and sent them a survey and said, what would your ideal office building look like, office space look like? And actually, what would you... We actually did a picture gallery and actually asked them to pick designs and how they thought it would look and what they preferred. So we took all that data. Actually, we went out to 3 different design companies and asked them to design the perfect office based on what the people have asked for. We then put some thinking around that and what that looked like. And today that's now complete, and we've just opened the doors only a couple of weeks ago. So early days, but the feedback's been fantastic so far.
Excellent. Okay. Well, talk me through your thought process around the design and construction of these new offices.
So I think we transferred quite a bit of thinking from the first project into the second. One, because once you found something that works, you might as well take the best ideas and learning from that and transfer it across. So the first thing was around the actual design of the office and what we wanted it to do. So and I think that's always the best place to start in terms of try and visualise how you're going to be working in that space in the future. So we based it on the design on 4 principles: innovation. We really wanted an office space where we could bring people in and innovate, and not just our own people. Can we bring our supply chain partners in? Could we bring our clients in and innovate together? And could we create that space which really promoted innovation and created that creativity? So that was the first one. The other one was togetherness or collaboration. I think they're very similar words, but how do we get that sense that we're one team? And how do we make sure everyone's working together and collaborating really well together? So that was really important, that we designed the space that enabled people to collaborate and work together. And then the other area was sustainability. How can we make sure it was sustainable? It was an environmentally friendly building. It was the space promoted sustainability as well. So we looked at that in terms of, it was already a EPC rated A building, so it already had a good EPC rating. But then all the things we put in there, like furniture and other things, we were really, really keen to look at that. And then finally, the other area in there was well-being, and how do we make sure it was a place that promoted wellbeing amongst our people, particularly as they were coming out of a COVID world, pandemic world, and how are we going to promote the wellbeing of our people as well. So they were the key things we looked at. We broke those into 3 key cornerstones, and I used these 3 key cornerstones across both projects. One around people, and that's really important. You've got to think about the end user and how they're going to use the space. Second one about space, and make sure we had the right space and it was laid out properly. And the third one about technology. And I think if you take any parts of that triangle away, it collapses. So you've got to keep in your mind all the time and all the way through the process, people, place and technology.
Brilliant. So you mentioned technology. Can you give us more information about the kinds of technology you used and how it's helped you achieve the desired business outcomes?
We use technology throughout the process, so it's probably easier to break it down as we went through the design and build and actually into operation process in terms of, and both were very similar. So first of all, in terms of the design, we used CAD, we used BIM, 3D modelling and all different types of technology to actually visualise what the space was going to look like. And actually we brought in key stakeholders, our own employees, the first project, their employees as well, to come and look at that and see what it was going to look and feel like when we designed it and get their feedback to make sure it's going to be right for them. We also brought in people like building control, we brought in fire officers, we brought in health and safety officers to actually walk the space, make sure that the design was right, and that actually saved changes later. So obviously once you get into construction phase, any change of construction phase are extremely expensive to make. So actually doing those before you even put a spade in the ground saved an awful lot of time. So that was really through the design and actually trying to visualise what it would look like and make sure we got the right size and shape of space. Of course, the files that come out of that BIM modelling in terms of we were using Revit, so your Revit files and that, actually then create all your drawing files and etc. And we were able to not only use those to make sure the design was right and actually use those for the construction partners to build against. We now use them today in terms of managing the space. So those drawings of the floor plans, for example, now we overlay with all the desks on. We overlay what spaces are, where people are sat, where people aren't sat. It measure utilisation across those as well. So that was really through the design phase. Into the build phase, obviously we continued to use those DWG files and make sure everything was designed and followed it through. The other thing we put in was an awful lot of technology. So we started putting in, one of the big things around following COVID, the big ask was, how do people work what we call home and away? So if you're in the office or you're away from the office, how do you make sure people have the same feel in terms of if you're in a meeting? So often you go into meetings and everyone's sat there with their laptop in front of them. And everyone's not looking at each other. They're all looking at the laptop because the only thing they've got is Teams on a laptop. So they're all just talking to a laptop, or worse still, doing emails, as I'm sure we've all been guilty of at time to time. What we wanted to do was to create a space. So we created Teams rooms. So there was cameras in the room that would follow the meeting round. You invite the meeting room to the meeting. So now everyone's immersive in the meeting. So everyone's now starting to talk to each other without a laptop in front, taking those boundaries away and actually communicating. And that went with the audio systems and all those other things in there as well. In terms of utilisation, not only in the design phase was utilisation key, because our intent from the start wasn't to say if we've got a UK workforce of 75, 76 people at the moment, wasn't to create an office for 75, 76 people, because we knew that's not what we were aiming at. We knew not everyone was going to be in the office every day. But what we did was we tried to work through what did we think was a reasonable occupancy rate on the building. So we went for just under 50%. So we can accommodate just under 50% of the workforce in the office any one time, sat at a workstation, working, plus meeting rooms, plus breakout spaces and those as well. But actually what we did was we put sensors, some really clever cameras that sit in the corner, pixelate the room, and then determine how many people are sat in which seats.
Right.
So that way we could actually get some real-time feedback over who was sat there and what they were doing. And then we also looked at technology from a sustainability point of view. So put in smart metering so we could start measuring the energy consumption of the building, etc. So we used a lot of different tools and techniques. We've got some really clever things like 105-inch touchscreens, which are really clever. We use whiteboard cameras, so you can stand in front of a whiteboard, drawing on the whiteboard, and it's digitising it while you're writing, but takes you out the image and that. So wherever we saw an opportunity, and it was one of the things that the people said, our own people said at the start, we wanted a modern office that was technology focused. So I think the feedback's been really great from them.
Well, that's brilliant. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned sustainability was one of your key principles. Can you provide examples of how the technologies you mentioned are being utilised to enhance sustainability and environmental consideration in office design?
For me, sustainability starts with one thing, and I've always believed this. You need to optimise your assets. So the biggest saving you can make on your carbon footprint is to reduce the amount of energy you consume. The best way to reduce the amount of energy you consume is to reduce the number of assets you occupy. So right sizing your assets I've always believed, strongly believed, is the biggest step forward towards sustainability and actually reducing maintenance costs and all the other knock-on effects. So actually making sure we can measure occupancy is really key. So that's why we use those sensors to actually capture that occupancy. And the problem you've also got to think in that is we also use space booking and desk booking tools. So because if you are going to only provide half the seats to your population, you've got to think about how people are going to book desks and reserve seats and things like that as well, and meeting rooms. So we can use that data coming from those to actually predict future use, but we can also use that to look at consumption as well. The other area for us was, as I say, smart meters in terms of capturing that energy and working and calculating that through. We put some other things in place. So the bits for me are, if I can measure my occupancy, what's my busiest days? Yeah. So if let's say if Friday, and we're still capturing the data, so we're still monitoring this, but if Fridays is a quiet day, do I close the office on a Friday and save and reduce my energy consumption, my carbon footprint, because I've taken one day out of that consumption? Although you need to recognise that you've got an assets out there that you're still paying for.
So be very popular with the staff.
Yeah, maybe. But it may be on certain days, because we're spread across 4 suites on 2 floors. Do you shut a suite down? Yeah. And therefore I've reduced my energy consumption. We also put PIR light sensors in everywhere. So you're turning off lights automatically. You're not lighting areas you don't need to. We've linked the heating system with the BMS, so we control the heating straight through the BMS. The next phase we're doing at the moment is linking the BMS to our Maximo CAFM system, so we can actually start collecting the data from the BMS as well, and then work with our FM provider around how we work with that effectively. So I don't think it's that one size fits all. I think you've got to take an active view across the piece. Waste is another big area we're looking at the moment, and how we can capture waste, and can we do that through technology, and how do we get to data around that as well. So lots of different facets to that.
So good for the environment, but also good for your finances as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's next? So how do you envisage leveraging the technology to continuously monitor and improve the performance of these new office spaces in the future?
We're in the early days of data capture now, so all the systems are in. We're starting to collect that information, not only from an occupancy point of view, but from energy, etc., as I've spoken about before. I think linking to the BMS is going to be really important in terms of being able to pull that information straight from the building management system, and what that information is also telling us as well. I think we need to start looking at our analytics suite as well. So we're starting to go, right, we've got the data. We had a good idea at the start of what our requirements were and what we wanted to measure around the building, around that well-being, around togetherness, etc., sustainability, and innovation. How do we turn that into some data metrics that are telling us whether we're achieving what we set out to achieve? And also, as I say, it's early days, but how are we measuring that utilisation? What can we do to improve utilisation? Are we seeing collaboration? As I say, the space is laid out into 3 different zones: collaboration, communication, and concentration. We can measure each of those zones, and we've laid it out, and they've been designed quite differently to promote different ways of working. So we're trying to change the way we work in the future, from rather you work the same way no matter where you sit, to actually you go and work in the place that best suits the way you want to work. So if you want to work quietly, you may be writing the paper or writing some code, you go and sit and concentrate. If you want to be able to sit in a noisy and high energy environment where you can talk to your colleagues while you're working, you'll go and sit in collaboration. And if you want to have meetings, etc., or breakouts, you'll go to one of the communication zones and do that. So, and they're laid out into types of different rooms. So the space is really laid out to try and promote different ways of working. So we'll continue to monitor that. It may be that more people need to spend more time in concentrate. So we may need to, from the utilisation data we get, we may need to increase the amount of concentration space. It may be people really want to collaborate, all the time. So, but we've designed it so we can still shift the space around quite easily through furnishings and planting and that. So we can move the space around.
Brilliant. So some amazing insights. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Neil.
Cheers.